Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Chris and Andre Show. Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Chris and Andre Show. We're super glad you joined us. We are just stacking up the hits here. This is episode 73. And we haven't released anything as of yet.
I don't even think we're going to release any more episodes. I think we're just going to keep recording these for ourselves now. This is our new private podcast, the Chris and Andre Private Podcast Show.
Yeah, we're going to hoard all the goodness. Yeah.
No, this is like I talked before about like with Instagram where you just have to build up a bunch of content and then drop it all at once. No, like we talked about last week, not that you guys have heard it, but you will eventually, maybe. Life happens, right? Like life comes at you fast, and in the midst of a move, planning a wedding, getting my house down here ready, I have dropped the podcast ball, so to speak. But
yeah, we even try to split up the duties, and it's still failing. Still.
Yeah.
No, it's all good.
No, I mean, like it is what it is. Like at the end of the day, right? We do this more for us than anybody else, and so the important thing is for me that we show up and we record this when we can, because especially living now like 2.5 hours away from you, I don't get to just drop in and have lunch every so often. So, like I got to make sure I get some time with my best man.
I know, right? I got work to do, son.
But yeah, it's
nigga's job ain't hard enough.
I mean, there was literally nobody else that was even in running.
No, I know. I'm just
for the role. I know you're just joking, but I'm just being honest here. Like there was
got enough to do.
There was not a second thought.
Well, I didn't hesitate to say yes. I mean, because you're my dude, man, and I love you a lot, and I'm really happy for you.
Hey,
I got fitted for my tux.
Oh hell yeah!
And I was like, yo, I'm in there, yo.
Yeah, now it's real, right?
Yeah, I already paid money.
Yeah,
like, what?
So now it's real.
Yeah, it's like real. It's like when I start dishing out pennies, it's like, yo, it's going down. You better get married.
I mean, you only get married twice, right?
I know, right?
Well, we only get married twice.
Well, marriage is a wonderful thing. I love. You know what? Speaking of that, I really love my wife. Like I just like the more I spend time with her, I realize like, yo.
You just now realizing that?
No, it's.
I'm sorry, Tetchy. You know that he loves you. I know she's gonna.
Yeah, there's some times. There's some times where you just kind of. If you don't slow down long enough to realize, and I may have said this to you before, but I was talking to somebody a while ago, and they asked me why I got married, and I said it's the perfect personification of seeing love being alive, right? Like, and it's just amazing, right? Now every day's not perfect, but for the most part, it's really amazing. And the second thing I would equate to that is just my children. Like, my daughter's going off to college in a few,
3 weeks.
No, like 2 weeks, less than 2 weeks now.
Damn,
I'm
dude.
so sad. Yeah, and
I
was
stop.
just, I know.
She's making me feel old, and she's not even my kid.
I know, right? And I was just like, we went somewhere and she's like, Dad, blah, 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 blah. And I was like, one of the coolest things of my day is to hear my kids call me Dad, right? It just melts my heart. And like once it chips through all the cold stone around it.
I'm sitting here going like, the only times I hear Dad are when it's prefacing my kid getting ready to ask me a question that I'm probably going to say no to, where it's like, Dad. And it's even if we're the only two people in the car, like it's not just, hey, what about this? It's always Dad. And I'm like, is there somebody else that you would be and I know that it's just like, I don't know. But I also recognize not always in the moment, but later usually. Like there will be that time, right, where that goes away or it changes. And I mean, because it used to be, dada or daddy, and occasionally I still get a daddy, but it's mostly dad at this point, which is okay. I like or padre. I get padre a lot, which I do. I love padre.
I am like on. This is the last kid for us. This is like.
I mean, I would hope so. Like that would be.
Oh, I would definitely. I'm not quitting this race. We are so at the finish line. But this is our last one, moving out and going further and further away from us. So, it's emotional.
So are you going to be going through the like empty nest syndrome, or are you like? Do you feel like part of you will just be glad to some, not like glad, but like, oh, okay, like now it's me and my wife and we kind of get like our lives back to ourselves?
Well, when your kid becomes a teenager, you pretty much are in that realm.
Okay.
Yeah, you're kind of like you have a roommate like that doesn't pay any money. Yeah. So it's like, all right.
So but like my old roommates.
Yeah. So it's basically like, but it's also like she was telling me I'm going to miss being at home. And I'm like, yeah, I'm going to miss, just knowing that you're that much closer, and it's even with our boys. And like, Kevin just turned 30, so it's like, it's one of those things where you're always kind of asking yourself, like, well, you've done a good job because, they get older and they're not dead.
Yeah. Because you see it, right, day to day.
Yeah.
To some degree. Yeah,
but it's always that realization that, this is a person that's doing their own thing, and, they're going to have their own opinions, and it's really a cool feeling.
I don't know that my dad agrees with you on it being a cool feeling. Sometimes I think he wishes that I would just agree with him more often.
Well, I can just kind of like simulate a conversation between the two of you with like the little quips and the sarcasm going back and forth.
It's what's really funny is when he realized it when we moved down here. He's like, you and your mom together are an unstoppable force. Like, you two team up on me and I can't get a damn word in edgewise. I don't even like it just comes naturally. It's not like I'm trying to do it. It's just, that's what pops into my head, and the filter in my head says, yeah, no, that's good. Let it go.
I'll tell you this, like, when we went to New York, Matt was like, man, Dad, you don't get a break between Techi and my sister. I'm like, yeah, I know. It's like, I'm glad you got my back today. Cause it's like, I always walk away, licking my wounds, but it's all good. It's just one of those things where I'm grateful, and it's like, wow, it's going to be a big moment, right? So, yeah, it's awesome.
Yeah.
So, what do you got? I know we haven't talked in a while, which is sad.
We talked last week, didn't we?
Well, I mean,
I'd say like a while. I mean, yeah,
a while.
You're right. Yeah. We haven't been communicating quite as much frequently, or quite as frequently as we had been for a little while there, even texts and stuff like that. Is it, like we were talking about earlier, there's just been so many things going on here kind of simultaneously, and whatnot. And obviously you've got your life going on as well, but yeah, I mean, like, things have been pretty good down here. We're making some progress on the house, and that's exciting. We've got painters are in this week, and so we're starting to see color on the wall, which is great. Starting to get the feeling for what it's actually going to kind of feel like. The biggest holdup right now is kitchen cabinets, and trying to get that stuff. We jumped on the appliance stuff early and kind of got that done, but now it's like we're sitting here waiting probably another 10 to 12 weeks, for our cabinets to arrive according to the estimate. So, I mean, and there's nothing that can be done about it, but it's...
if you think this is done, I mean, I think our economy, as I said before, we're probably looking at 2023 of getting some normalcy back. Like, our supply chain is so weak.
Yeah. Well, and then what'll be interesting is to see what happens with housing market and interest rates and all of that stuff. I was just reading an article the other day that was talking about that yes, there will be a burst of this bubble at some point, but the hope is that well, I shouldn't say the hope. The article stated that they were hoping that the Fed would basically keep interest rates artificially low long enough to stave off the housing bubble, which I don't really understand.
They won't be able to do that.
Right.
So I was reading an article, and I heard the same thing come across NPR, that the housing shortage in the United States is, since '08, has been about 1 million a year.
Well, and they were saying this is the fewest number of available units for sale in the United States at any point since they started tracking it, basically. Like, there's usually 2.0 to 2.5 million, I think, units available for sale, and right now they're averaging like 1.3 million. And so it's and then you couple that with people having stimulus money that they may have saved, or low interest rates, right? Equity in their home that they're trying to sell, but then turn around and buy what, right? I mean, like, that's been a big issue. And that was a question that people kept asking us when we put the house for sale up in Cary, was like, well, what are you guys doing? And we were fortunate enough at the time that we already had our place down here locked in, and so, but it's almost like that's how you have to do it now. But most people aren't financially in a position where that's something they're able to do. I mean, I had to float.
Or there's not enough inventory.
Or that,
right?
yeah. I mean, there's still, like, we got lucky because the house that we bought down here never went on the market. Like, we had no competition for it. We knew through friends of my family that it was coming on, and we met, and I was like, hey, yeah, I just want to get out. Like, I'm moving. He was relocating somewhere else, and was like, there's work that the house needs to be done, that needs to be done in the house, but I don't really have the time or the money to sit here and do it all. And so if I'm gonna, if I was gonna go through the process of putting it on the market, it'd take me forever, let alone the amount of money that it would cost me. And so, I mean, we were.
It's a hurry up and wait game, and I've got the bug. I've got a friend that they just bought a house also, and sold their house, but their new house won't be ready for 10 months. So part of me is kind of the realtor brain is like, you don't want to buy at the top end of a bubble.
No,
like, if I'm being super honest, like, I just instinctively say that's a bad idea.
And to be fair, right, it depends on what you're buying and at what point you're buying. But chances are, the average house that you're buying, you're probably paying significantly more for it right now than you would in other years or other markets. And I mean, that was part of my thinking in selling the house up in Cary too. Like, where I listed the house, I wasn't trying to put it at like, oh, somebody's going to have $250,000 in cash to drop in order to be able to come buy this, right? Or putting somebody in a position where they're so over leveraged trying to get into the home that if the market falls out, for whatever reason, that then they're risking, not that, I mean, obviously people have their own financial situations and stuff like that it's not like I'm responsible, but I wasn't trying to be that guy that's like, oh, I got to get
trying to gouge people.
Exactly. Yeah. Like, I felt like what I asked for was reasonable and what I got was reasonable. It wasn't.
I think your price was reasonable. And I told you, like, you'll sell it within 30 days.
Right. I mean, it was within that first week that I had. I mean, what's funny is I thought I'd have a lot more interest in it. Like, I thought I'd have a lot more people coming to see it. And I mean, if I'd gone the agent listing route, then I probably would have, right? But then, like, ultimately, you only need one person to buy the house. I don't need 15 people. And
the rule of thumb I've always, it's held true for me, and I could be wrong though. For a buyer, they typically like, of the first 3 houses, it's typically number 1 if you've done your job right, if you listen to what they're asking for. Yeah. And of the sellers, you're probably going to get within the first 5, showings of your house. And like, you just know it's always been, and I can only speak for this market, like Wake County, but it's true. Like, when I watch Property Hunters or whatever that crap is I'm like, well, I knew it was the first 3 houses, so the realtor obviously did their job. And if you watch the body language, you can pretty much guess and I was always right. So it was kind of like no fun for me to watch that show.
I was
like,
not often right on that. I would
Really?
usually guess wrong, and I think a lot of the times it was because it was the one that I would pick, not necessarily what they wanted. Right? Like I'm like, no, you're
Yeah.
crazy. That's not right. I want this house. Doesn't matter what you want. But I always like that show was always like, Mark and Julie have, 7 children and 45 dogs, plus a chicken. They're looking for a small bungalow near the beach that's under $50,000. Like.
but
they
they
also
always
within walking distance of Mark's job downtown. Like, what? These are things that cannot be true at the same time.
But they always tell you what they're looking for. They gave you the profile in the first part of the show. But I sold houses, so it's like, oh, and I was a consultant, so it's like, oh, okay.
Yeah.
Given that information, only one thing can be true. The possibility of 2, but just one.
Chances are they're only buying one house. So.
Oh, chances are. I don't know. I think that I got the itch because I kind of do. My wife is preparing for grandchildren that won't happen for like another 10 years, probably 5 to 10 years. And I kind of, as I look at my kids, I'm like, oh crap. Like eventually I'm going to be like a granddad. And it's actually going to be a thing. So, whatever we do, we're going to remodel the house, stay here for a year. I think the market will probably settle by the time we're ready to buy. We might move downtown and just rent our house and get an apartment so I can get that out of my system.
That's cool.
So, yeah. I think I would really enjoy to live downtown, if I'm being honest. Like, I mean,
I know. I mean, you're the city boy. Like, you love being in that city life and coming from New York, obviously. So I get it. It's not. Like there was a time where I might have been interested in living downtown, but I mean, I spent the last 18 years in the suburbs, so
I like. Don't get me wrong, I like the suburbs, but it's kind of like it's great for like when you have family come over.
Yeah,
that's about it. Like other than that, like every day, like Monday through Friday,
there's not much, right?
It's restrictive.
It can be. I mean, and Cary, I think to some degree is kind of. I mean, it is a suburb, obviously, but it was a pretty developed suburb. It's not like you had to go real far to get to stuff in Cary necessarily. Like most of the things that you would want to do were relatively close to you, or at least you had an option that was close to you. Maybe it wasn't the best Denny's, but it was an okay Denny's.
So we went to a comedy show in a mixed use development, going towards RTP, right?
Okay.
Going towards E area, their second home, and first of all, the comedy show was lit.
Yeah.
It was like, we saw Miss Peggy.
What name sounds familiar?
She's hilarious. Like she's like super hilarious. She's getting a show on BET.
Nice.
Yeah, her set was dope. Eddie Griffith's going to be there August 18th and 19th, and we're probably going to go see him. So I don't know what you're doing in August, but I do know what you're doing in August. So you're probably preparing for other stuff, but it was a very good experience. And my wife was like, I really like this. She was as we were looking for parking, she's like, you can literally walk to get dinner and stuff like that. And now, to be fair, she's from New Jersey, so it's not like she's oblivious to what it's like to be in a more populated area.
Yeah.
It's just that she's so used to being in the burbs.
I mean, New Jersey is basically a suburb of New York, so no
yeah,
offense to New Jersey, unless you want to take take it.
Yeah, and it's also the garbage dump of New York, but that's a whole other episode. But but like I know I told you when I went to New York, I just feel like I'm at home.
Yeah.
And like I haven't lived there in like years, and it's like I just feel so much more comfortable.
I mean, I do. Like, I completely understand it, and I'm the opposite, right? Like, I've spent one year living in anywhere relatively close to downtown, which was my 1 year on campus at NC State. Right. Every other year of my life that I remember, at least, has been spent, and probably even before that, was spent in the suburbs. That's my comfort zone more than anything.
Yeah,
that's where the white people are. So.
I know. I mean, low key, it's cool to be in a place where people aren't looking at you, and like you just kind of blend in, and that's a big majority of it. And just the pace is different, you know.
Yeah.
Like so, when we were in Harlem, I had to go get beer because I always have to buy beer wherever I'm at. So we went to this.
Did they not have beer when you were?
Well, no, my aunt does. She drinks, but she didn't have beer. She was cooking all the food, and I was like, "Where's the beer?" She goes, "You got to go to the store." I'm like, "All right, you don't got to tell me twice."
Yep. Did you go to
it was
the corner store, the bodega?
No, it was actually a grocery store, and that still blows my mind. You know? Like, it messes me up, man.
Like a Publix,
it's like a competitor to Whole Foods, right? So we walk like a block, whatever. I've got my son, and it was my son and my brother-in-law went with me, and like I literally almost left them because they weren't walking fast enough. I'm like, "Yo, come on, let's go!"
Well,
like you know,
in
they're
New York, like you can't. People will just
you can't be lounging around. Yeah. I mean, but that's the environment I'm used to being in, where you can actually walk to whatever. Like if I want to go to the grocery store, I can't walk to the grocery store. You know.
Yeah. I mean, I hear you. Like, even in Cary, I had that Harris Teeter that was literally right down the street from my house. I had a Food Lion before that turned into a Walmart neighborhood grocery that was even closer. And I remember one year...
You can't walk there.
Right. Like, one year we got a bad snowstorm, and we walked to the Food Lion because we didn't have any food. And this was, I think, our first year living at the house in Cary. And that was awful. That was a terrible experience. I mean, like, and I wouldn't do that. Like, that was enough to convince me not to do that not in the snow. Like, it wasn't going to be that much better when it wasn't in the snow.
Yeah, it's crazy. And like for me, that's like I'd rather walk or, you know, whatever. But I don't think a car is like it shouldn't be my primary mode of transportation. But, you know, it is what it is. But I do love New York. I do love, you know, I love the idea that the Triangle is actually considering a rail. I'm not sure if you probably didn't read
No,
that,
because
but...
I don't live there anymore, so I don't care. Like it doesn't affect me. So no, I had no idea, but I'm rolling my eyes somewhat because it's like, of course, I move, and now they're like, oh yeah, well maybe we'll put in a light rail system or something.
Yeah, and I was also looking at train tickets, right?
Mm-hmm.
Now, this is another thing that we talked about this a lot, right? Like going let's say for example to Charlotte.
Yeah.
And I was like, well, forget Charlotte. What if I wanted to take a train to New York? It's about 8 hours, whatever, give or take. And provided I plan my trip, let's say, so my birthday is in September, and like the week or two after I was like, well, let's see what happened. This is a week ago. The week of, if I would have planned it from that point to my birthday, granted my birthday is a holiday weekend, it was like as much as the plane ticket, like two-way. Mm-hmm. It was like $350. Yeah. Now, so if I backdated that, if I was doing the same exercise like 3 weeks earlier, it's like $125, 2 people round trip.
That's not bad.
I spent like maybe $120 in gas going to New York. I'm like, so for me, it's like, no brainer.
Yeah.
I mean, it becomes one of those things where it's like, well, there are ways to, you know, so for me, a light rail in Raleigh, or if they figure out a way to get reliable public transportation, I'm all on it, dude.
I mean, I would love it. You know, like we've talked about on the podcast before, that like I still don't understand how it is that they don't have a rail system that runs from Wilmington, one of the largest ports in North Carolina, let alone the East Coast.
It is the largest port in North Carolina.
Yeah, up to Raleigh, like one of know, and then on to Charlotte. Like, why would that not be something that you would want to be? And like, they have rail stations down here. And they go up and down the coast, but they don't go inland. Right. And it's like, what is the point of that? Like, I would have loved to been able to hop on a train and ride down to the beach for a day, right? Like, you could do a day trip, ride down in the morning, come back in the evening. You could do a weekend trip, right? Like, I mean, that would make things so much simpler. And think about, like, you're reducing the congestion on the roads, right?
It's $65. It was like 3 weeks out, 2 people round trip from Raleigh to Charlotte. I'm like, yeah, all day. Like, I won't even blink. I'm like, yeah, let's go to the station. Let's take an Uber to the station, and we'll be back like tomorrow, whatever. Yeah. So hopefully the infrastructure bill provides for something. Now, granted, it'll take years to get the construction done, but
if they can actually get the funding for it and start the projects, then I mean, I'm all for it. You know, like, I think we as a country have put so much on the backs of our road system, you know, and cars in terms of our infrastructure, and even that we've let crumble to a disgusting degree. And you know, I know people are complaining about, well, the infrastructure bill is not really for infrastructure if they're putting in high-speed internet. And I'm like, what part of the internet do you not understand is infrastructure? Like, infrastructure is not just roads and bridges. Like, there's dams, there's railway, there's airports, there's, like, all of this stuff is the infrastructure of the country. Like, electrical. It's like,
that's your grandmother's, like, infrastructure.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, we all freaked out on the East Coast because we couldn't get gas in the Southeast, right?
Yeah.
And I get the argument. So, well, partially on the soft infrastructure, I kind of get that. Like, I'm like, yeah, that's a stretch.
So when you say soft infrastructure, just so I make, not for me because I know what you mean, but for everybody listening.
So when they're talking about universal pre-K, when they're talking about, you know, all these, I'm like, that's more of education. And if you really want to make Republicans pissed off, tell them they don't support education. Right. I mean, there's a lot of ways you can spend that. And it goes back to what I keep stressing. Look, queue these bills up.
Yeah.
Like, queue them up.
They're swinging home for home runs. I mean, it's like, we got to get everything in one, because God knows if we're ever going to have this chance again. And it's like, stop playing this stupid, like, chicken ball. Like, just go out and do the things that you think need to be done and do them right. Like, that's what you need to do. If you guys would stop dicking around in Washington and do those things, like, you might actually stand a chance at having a democratic, you know, controlled government.
I mean, the adage or the fact has been brought up so many times that Republicans, they play politics to win and Democrats don't.
Yeah.
And I think that's true. I saw a Democratic strategist earlier in the week, and he mentioned something to that effect. And I was like, well, he's not wrong, right? But I think they keep chasing, and I'm not saying the filibuster's right, but it's not the hill I'm willing to die on. So if I'm playing chess and it's taking me 6 extra moves to position my pieces, I'm not going to waste another 4 moves to try or just have the hope of getting a checkmate.
Right.
It's just stupid chess. It's like, no, that doesn't work. It's not worth it to me. I'd rather remove more pieces off the board and play the game with strategy, as opposed to, well, it took me 8 moves just to get these positions, like 8 more than my opponent, and now I'm going to go for the checkmate. No, idiot, you're already behind in the game. Like, and that's what the filibuster is. It has no. It's important. It's not mission critical. The better play is to change the board, right? Like, and I don't think Democrats understand that. It's like they want to go in for the kill, just because it looks easier, and or it looks more attainable.
Yeah, which I don't understand. Easier. Like, how you think that the well, it's easier to hit a home run than it is to get 4 singles. I mean, and maybe that's true. You know, maybe in baseball terms, like, it's easier.
Actually, it's not.
Yeah. Well, I take it back.
I just did the math in my head. It's totally not.
I watch so much baseball, so.
Like, I'd rather get on base, right?
Yeah.
I'd rather get
That's like,
Yeah, I'd rather get on
look,
base.
I would just as soon, right? If I'm at bat, I'd just as soon lay down a bunt to the third baseline and get on base at first as I would smack a home run, like,
Right.
or strike out swinging for a home run,
Right.
right? Like, because that's more likely where you're gonna end up.
If it's a 2-3 count,
Yeah,
like you're you're 50-50 everywhere you go, right? So the safe bet is to get on base. That's where the Democrats have been on a 2-3 count for at least 2 decades, since Clinton. And they don't have enough baseball players in Congress, I guess. Like,
maybe they have some other analogy that they would understand better than baseball. But yeah, I'm with you. Like, it just seems like we're kind of sitting here watching them piss this whole 2 years away is what it feels like to me. You know, I mean, I was reading a headline today that was like, you know, Joe Biden has the worst week of his presidency this week because of everything that's been going on. And I don't agree that is, you know, explicitly true, but it's also, we've talked about this before, like these stupid sensational clickbaity headlines that everybody has to write now, you know, like,
I've tuned out of social. Like, I actually deleted, and I didn't have Twitter, the official app on my phone, just the web app, and I took it off. I looked at it on yesterday, and I just can't.
I have found myself engaging. I mean, Twitter is one of those things where maybe once every 2 weeks I'll think about, like, oh, I guess I'll see what's on Twitter. It all depends on what's going on. There are some times where I'm kind of curious. So, like, Sunday, here, before we go into this,
sports
ever so slightly. So Sunday, I'm sitting there watching. I wasn't even watching yet, but the F1 Grand Prix in Hungary was running, right? And at the very first turn of the very first lap, Valtteri Bottas, Lewis Hamilton's Mercedes teammate, misjudges the braking in the rain, plows into the back of the McLaren, who plows into the Red Bull cars and takes out Sergio Perez and heavily damages Max Verstappen's, the right side of his car. So then
Jesus Christ.
I'm like, what? It's like chaos, you know, to start the beginning of this race. So then they had to red flag it. So I got on Twitter because I wanted to see the video. Nobody had the video. The F1 channel didn't, like, their Twitter stream did not have video. They had still images, and that was all they would show. And it must be whatever licensing agreement they have with the TV. But I was just like, you've got to be kidding me. Then I'm watching this, so I turned on the TV. They wouldn't even show replays of it. It was still red flagged, and I'm like, what are you guys doing? All I want to do is see this crazy crash. That wasn't even, like, the best part of the race. That was one of the most insane F1 races, probably the most entertaining that I've watched. And all of a sudden, I've gotten into F1 lately. It was all about so when I went to VIR with my dad and his buddy for the motorcycle races, we were watching the Drive to Survive or whatever it is, the F1 series that they have on Netflix, where it's every week they go basically behind the scenes and have interviews and all that. And so we were watching some of that, and, like, I started kind of just being like, okay, this is actually kind of interesting now. Like, now that I'm understanding
F1 is dope.
Dynamics and all this stuff. And I mean, I'd watched F1 previously when I was younger, but I never got, like, that into it. NASCAR was always kind of my the thing that I understood or that we watched the most, I guess, as a family. But now I've gotten, like, super heavy into F1 racing, and so I am I am a little bit of a bandwagon fan. Like, I like Lewis Hamilton. I think he's a pretty cool dude. You know, like, Max Verstappen is the Dutch guy with Red Bull that's been coming on strong lately, but watching him drive, like, guy is such an asshole out there. He basically expects everybody else to get out of his way. Like, I'm here, this is my space. And that was the whole thing last week at Silverstone in the British Grand Prix, or 2 weeks ago, was him and Lewis, who are 1 and 2 in the points and have been basically all season, were racing hard in one turn, and everybody feels like Lewis Hamilton didn't give Max Verstappen enough room. Max Verstappen came down a little close, and Verstappen went out into the wall, 51 Gs, hitting the wall sideways, had to go to the hospital. He was okay, fortunately.
Right.
But then everybody was all pissed off because Lewis Hamilton went on to win the race, even though they penalized him 5 position points or 5, or no, they made him do a stop and go. I think they had like a 10-second stop and go penalty or something like that for the accident. And he still went on to win the race and then was celebrating because he's at home in Britain at Silverstone racing the British Grand Prix. People were like, that's so unclassy, like you wreck your opponent in the first lap and then you're out celebrating. You didn't deserve that win. And it's just like, you watch that video over and over again. Both of them could have given each other more room. Neither one of them did. They're the 2 best drivers in the series right now, driving 2 of the best cars, and they both felt like he's going to blink, right? That's what happens in racing. That's racing. Like,
that's life.
It's life, exactly. And even Max Verstappen now has been like, it was great leading up to the race this weekend. They had an interview. He's sitting there, and him and Lewis Hamilton are on stage next to each other. And somebody's asking, well, after Silverstone, what are we going to see if you guys get side by side? And the guy couldn't even finish the question. And Max is like, can we just cut this shit out? Like, we've been answering this question since 2 weeks ago. Yes, we are both competitive drivers. And if we get side by side in this race, yes, you will see more competitive racing. But neither one of us is going to wreck the other person on purpose. And they were like, oh, Lewis, you have anything to add? And he's like, nope. See, and I think, like, deep down, those guys are probably, they're not, like, best friends, but I think there is a level of mutual respect and admiration for the skill sets that they have. Lewis Hamilton has been an absolute beast in that series for 7 years now. Like,
yeah, he's like, I've only seen like a lot of highlights of him. He's a very skilled driver, and it's like, look, it is what it is, it's like, come on. Speaking of people that should not be, well, actually, I'm going to contradict myself here.
Do it. There's nothing I love more than a good old Andre Powell contradiction.
We talked about Simone Biles, and last week I said, well, she's still in the individuals, and she pulled out of the individuals.
Yep. And then she came back to do the balance beam, which was the last event.
Yeah.
And won bronze, right? Bronze.
It's 3rd place, but whatever.
So we got to get into that now too, Ricky Bobby.
Well, that's how I was raised, man. Thank my parents.
So I actually had that conversation earlier this week just about, like, America is Ricky Bobby when it comes to the Olympics. If you ain't first, you're last. Like, we don't care if you're not winning gold. It doesn't matter. Like, it's gold or nothing, baby. Which is part of our problem, I'm pretty sure. We're a little too Ricky Bobby here in America.
Yeah, that's true. I think that, and I said last week that where are her people at, and to pull her off the ledge, blah blah blah, and I was confused about, well, why is she in the individuals, right? I look at it. I think I kind of came down to it where when I left a company, I was at the top of my game. I'd rather leave on top as opposed to, with my own internal struggles, like, get forced out of the game. Yeah. So I respect that. There was a former UFC fighter that made a point. This is my contradiction.
Yeah.
Where he took a shot across the bow of, like, where he agreed with me saying that she believed her press, but I don't think I liked it the way he said it. I was like, to paraphrase, he said, well, if she's gonna believe she's the GOAT, like, she really believed she's the greatest of all time. And I'm like, yeah, that probably wasn't helpful for her.
I think, like, there are, you got guys like Michael Jordan, right, who even when he was playing, people were looking at him like, this is the greatest basketball player that we've ever seen, like, there are those people who in the moment, right, I think are able to kind of embrace it. I think you saw, like LeBron, right? Like, he was considered not, it was always like, oh, is he the next MJ? Is he going to be better than MJ? All this stuff. And he dealt with that in his own way, right? Like, he tried to do it in Cleveland, couldn't get it done there, had to go to Miami, kind of learn how a team gets put together and what the pieces need to be and how he can kind of help to coordinate that. And now he's in this new role, right, where it's like, oh, I'm going to bring in Russell Westbrook to come hang out.
I got to cover my flank.
Yeah. And so, like, and I think, but it's one of those, right, like, even MJ came back and played with the Wizards, right? Like, he didn't go out on top in that regard. I think like for a lot of those guys, I mean, look at Tom Brady, right? Like, he could have retired, and now granted, like, he's going to come back, and they're probably the favorites to win the Super Bowl again. They're literally returning all 22 starters from last season. It is almost.
But Tom Brady is
the GOAT.
Is that? Yeah, unquestionably.
But that's the thing with Simone Biles, right? Is that she was doing things in those events that no one had ever even come close to attempting.
But it doesn't make you the GOAT. It makes you the trailblazer.
Sure.
There's a complete difference in that. I think and I believe there's a difference between being a trailblazer and being the greatest of all time.
Yeah.
Right. Now, I will say in another part of my contradiction, because part A was I didn't like what I said, basically, because somebody else said the same thing pretty much. I was like,
You're like,
maybe
wait a second.
I don't think I like that. The second part is like, I don't know what it's like to be or to experience quote unquote twisties.
Yeah.
Right. So it's probably not something you can validate, but it is something that you have to wonder as a spectator, how do they keep their footing?
Oh,
I can tell you what that's like in like a physical competition, like fighting or something. You've got to know. I can see a shoulder move.
Yeah.
You probably don't lose that. You probably don't lose your footing. Like that becomes muscle memory.
Mm-hmm.
I can only imagine what it's like to be propelled in the air and try to count how many times you twisted and turned.
Yeah, and then like losing it, right? And not knowing, am I going to come down on my head? Am I going to come? I mean, was it somebody said that? I think it was a former gymnast was saying like, basically, if anybody else had done what she did, where she pulled out and did less rotations and less twists on the vault than she intended, she was like, I would almost guarantee you that person would have blown out their knee. Like that. And not to say that, like, oh, wow, like she is the GOAT because she, but like, I'm with you in that I mean, the idea of propelling myself through the air like that is fairly terrifying in and of itself. But then like asking me to like flip and twist and rotate and then land on my feet, like after that is just, I don't know.
It's a whole nother question, right?
Yeah. I will say, like, one of the things that I think has kind of bothered me here recently is the number of people that I have heard say something to the effect of, well, when I watched her in trials, she just didn't seem right. Something was off.
I've actually said that.
See, and I don't like you for
watched,
it. No.
Well, come at me, dog.
Well,
I watched the trials, right?
Yeah.
And she was off. Like she was making like. We also watched part of the last World Games, right? Mm-hmm. She was very sure-footed and very like. It's no different than when I watched my daughter do karate, right?
Yeah.
I knew when she was off, right? Because now you're making mistakes that you have practice out of,
right?
Like my daughter's form, her foot placement, how she would bring her arm back up and things like that. And it wasn't a question of technique. It was a question of, no, those are practice moves you've done so many times. You don't make those mistakes. Right. There was a point when she was on the uneven bars where she missed, and I thought she was going to just like drop her body. She pulled her body back up, and with the strength in her legs and her torso, was able to complete the routine. I was like, God damn, she's strong.
And so I guess to clarify my comment, I don't have an issue with people, like with everybody saying it, right? Where I guess I find more issue are people who had a platform to maybe point it out previously and now feel like, oh, well, I knew something was up way back when, but I didn't say anything, kind of thing, right? Like,
Oh yeah,
I mean,
yeah,
like,
yeah.
you know, you and I said,
Me and my house
yeah,
doesn't matter,
exactly,
right?
right?
Yeah.
But like the ESPN anchors and the people on the Today Show and stuff like that now who want to come out and be like, well, you know, like, I didn't want to say anything at the time, but it's just kind of like, well, why wouldn't you? Like, that's your job as a sports reporter, as a journalist, right? Should be to report what's happening, not like, oh yeah, well,
So,
I mean, she's still the greatest even though she made these mistakes. Like, okay,
the contradiction to that is that everybody, like the UFC fighter said, the media made her,
right? Yeah,
right. So they
big chunk of it, right? I mean, think about it.
They can't go back and
you think NBC, right, is going to jump at the opportunity to say that Simone Biles might not look as great in this Olympics when all of their money that they put into having the Olympics on TV, right? Like, I mean, think about how many eyeballs they lost when she dropped out of the group competition and then the individuals.
But they were already off because of the fact that everything's like from,
but still, right? Like compounded then on top of that.
Yeah. And I say it as a parent, as somebody that's actually, you know, like our daughter had a chance to go to the Junior Olympics, and, you know, I'm not like a professional coach, but I'm an athlete, right? I'm not a professional athlete, but I'm an athlete, and you kind of you may not know the mechanics of every sport, but there are some fundamentals, right? And you can tell when an athlete's off. And I personally feel like she was off. Like, she doesn't have to try. Her worst is a bronze in the Olympics, basically, is what I'm saying.
Yeah.
Right. So either that says the competition is, they've got to try really hard, or she's just that damn good, right? Yeah. And I could tell in the trial she was off. And I told my wife, I'm like, she's off. There's something wrong with her. Like, every event, there are mistakes where, you know, even on her floor exercise, I'm like, she started her rotation too early. And she's like, what? I'm like, she's going to land outside the line. And sure as shit, because she's got so much power. Yeah. She just either she wasn't focused, or there was something else that was just, whatever it may have been. But I'm like, she's off.
So the other comment that I heard recently that I thought was kind of interesting was Nadal Djokovic, the tennis player, who was basically talking about, like, yeah, that's pressure. Like, you just got to deal with the pressure. And then he goes out and loses his match and throws a freaking hissy fit, chucking a racket up into the empty stands and smashing another one against the tennis net. And it's like,
hypocrisy.
Yeah,
much?
I mean, and like, I get it. Like, yeah, we call him on it and everything. It's not to say, like, I mean, he's not necessarily wrong, right? But I mean, personally, like, I wouldn't be sitting there being like, oh, I'm getting ready to compete in the Olympics, so let me talk crap about this other Olympic performer not performing under stress. Like, that just seems like karma in a lot of ways, where it's like, you know, you didn't have to say anything. You could have said, hey, man, you know, it happens to some people, and, you know, I hate it for her, but she's been a great competitor, blah, 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 whatever. You know, like, I'm not trying to put words in his mouth, but there's a million other things you could have said, and instead it felt like he was just kind of like, yeah, you know, some of us deal with pressure, some of us don't.
But he's not, again,
he's not wrong.
He's not wrong. He's not wrong.
The messenger may be flawed, but the message isn't.
He's not wrong. I mean, you know, there are certain areas in my life where the pressure's overwhelming, right? And it gets to a point of, like, I have two options. I can, like, or three: manage this, stress out, or get depressed, right?
You can do two of those three.
Yes.
Like, why are you making me do math, Chris?
Yeah. But there's, you know, if you're a parent, right, you probably know what Simone Biles feels like, right? There's the world's watching me, the weight of the world's on me, you know, and there's so much pressure, and she probably doesn't have anybody to talk to. Mm-hmm. Got it, right? If you're married, you probably know what Simone Biles felt like, right? Those scenarios happen across the board, not just in athletics or sport. It's just that as I said before, and I still think it holds true, your people got to pull you off the ledge.
Yeah.
Surround yourself with better people. Somebody should say, you're not good. And that's my message. It's like, hey, I'm glad she's making it through it. I would also say that, your people have got to, and when I, like, not your employees, but the people that you love and care about, trust, and you're honest with, should feel okay with saying, hey, you're not good right now.
Yeah.
And this is why I think you're not good. And that did not happen.
I mean, and yeah, like
because
I think, she put a lot of that pressure on herself too, right? I think, like, to kind of lead the U.S. team, and there's been a lot of talk about all of the, the Larry Nassar
expectations.
and all of that stuff, and her kind of carrying a lot of that for those victims, which I get.
But we don't know that.
Right, exactly.
That's what I think. That's speculation.
And that's exactly where I was going to go with it. So I thank you, because it is frustrating sometimes to hear other people try to speculate on exactly what it is. It's like,
right.
It should be enough to say this is, in her world, like the highest level of competition that she's going to compete at. The expectations for her were to basically, win gold across the board and to take Team USA to the gold medal in the team competition. And, like, that's enough. I mean, that's enough pressure in my mind I would struggle with that personally, I think. Like, if I were in that position. I'm not saying you would. I'm saying me personally.
No, but I think at the same time, it's like Megan Rapinoe, right?
Yeah.
Like, they lost to Canada.
Yeah. I mean, really?
That's an upset.
Really? Canada?
No, but it's an upset. Yeah, but if you lose against the same team, that it's like I always say about those breakout quarterbacks.
Yeah.
Let me watch enough tape.
Yeah.
U.S. and this is not a critique on their lineup, but it's like, maybe you should have changed the lineup. Maybe they were expecting way too much from you. There's a lot of things where you can look back in hindsight, and probably the upset's not that big of a deal.
Right.
Because it's kind of like, yeah, how many times is Canada going to lose against the same freaking squad?
Right. I mean, the law of averages, the law of probability states that at some point they're going to win one, right? And, it kind of sucks that it happened in the semifinal game where the U.S. was going, theoretically to go play for the gold. But, yeah, I don't know.
But their first set was when they lost their first round.
Yeah.
I knew they weren't going to go to.
I was with you on that. Like, when they lost early on, it was kind of like, okay, this is different for them, right? This is a different experience, and I don't imagine that they're going to be able to necessarily bounce back from that as well as other people think that they might, right? I mean, you saw the same
1-0
thing
loss.
with the men's basketball team.
Yeah.
I mean, they struggled early on, and it was like, oh, they're going to get reinforcements. They're going to have these guys coming, and it's just kind of like, it's just. I don't know.
I mean, you got like France, Argentina, Spain. They aren't jokes.
Yeah.
Like, they're literally not jokes. Like for the men's basketball team, you have to understand, like, a quarter of most of those teams play in the NBA. They know your secrets. Like, you're not like tricking them to, like, there's no tomfoolery going on.
Yeah. Well, and then I don't know. I mean, what are your thoughts? And I think we've maybe touched on this before, but the actual, like, the game in the NBA at this point, like,
it's garbage. Yeah. We don't play basketball
right?
anymore.
I mean, it's basically just shoot-arounds is what it feels like, And it's not that I want to go back to, like, the mid to late 90s of clog the lane, beat the crap out of the guy driving down, but I feel like there's got to be some middle ground. I mean, it's like,
it's college basketball.
At this point, if you're not jacking up threes, there's no point in taking, or like a clear slam dunk layup to the lane. Like, there's no point in taking any other shot,
It's college basketball is the last bastion of hope, in my opinion.
I don't even enjoy watching college basketball that much anymore.
You're full of crap. When you watch, like, an East Coast team play a Midwest team, it's a different game, right? The West Coast basketball that keeps winning championships has not dominated college basketball yet because it doesn't exist. Like,
well, right.
West Coast basketball.
You
right?
don't have the same level of shooters in college that you do at the pro level, I think is part of it.
Right. Well, that's
part.
That's part of it, but you have to play the game that the coach designs in college. Not necessarily in the NBA.
You think in the NBA players are more, or is it just that the coaches allow more freedom at the NBA level than they do at the college level? Yeah. I mean, do you think that's part of the reason that like Roy bailed is because he feels like college is moving towards what the NBA is?
I think that's part of it, and I also think that he's ready just to do something else.
Well, yeah, and we were just talking about going out on top, right? And not that they won a championship the year before, but like Roy didn't need to go win anymore, right? Like he's already one of the best.
Coach K's retiring, right? It's like,
I mean, thank God. Finally, NC State's going to have a shot here, ladies and gentlemen. Not really, because we're going to screw it up.
The ACC's going to. Yeah, it's going to be the Carolina conference.
You know what's going to happen is, so like, yeah, Duke and Carolina, they'll hire head coaches, and then the whole Adidas thing, the NCAA is just going to be like, no, we're actually just going to eliminate the men's basketball program at NC State. You guys can't have basketball anymore. I was cracking up because I was sitting here a few weeks ago listening to the Bomani Jones podcast, and he, on Fridays he gets Dominique Foxworth. They do Foxworth Fridays, which is one of my favorites. And Dominique used to play at Maryland he knows NC State. Bomani went to Carolina, so he knows NC State. They spent a solid 10 or 15 minutes talking about what happened to NC State. Like, it was one of the best. I mean, it was best and worst at the same time because they were so damn right. They were like, NC State, when they won the championship in '83, had as many championships as Carolina and 2 more than Duke. Duke hadn't even won a national championship at that point. But what happened in the 90s when college basketball blew up on the television, NC State was nowhere to be found because they had punished themselves into oblivion essentially at that point.
Based on what?
Based on the scandal with Valvano, on the selling of sneakers and tickets, right?
Yeah.
That whole thing.
But that
where
that
they
stuff,
didn't even find actual violations, right? This was all
that goes under the bridge.
It does. I mean, I get that, but it was just interesting because I had never really thought about it in terms of that, right? That like NC State as a brand.
It's a moot point.
Why is
it's
it a
more
moot
so.
Point?
It's the coach. Valvano had a lot of love.
He did.
People love Valvano. I'm like, yeah, I could have rocked with Valvano if they could, if he had as much swagger as Dean Smith. And remember, when I got into college basketball, it wasn't because I knew that I wasn't a college basketball fan. It was just because we moved here, and I'm like, oh, this team is consistent. You got Rick Fox. You got all these they're dope.
And Dean Smith did stuff that he was the one who basically was like, ACC, you guys got to integrate, right? I mean, he was the one who was taking his basketball players out to fancy dinners and having everybody else be like, you got a problem with this? This kid's gonna help you win a championship. Why are you staring at him, right?
He had so much swag. It was like. You believed in that coach, and I think he's as far as a leadership role, he's a personification of leadership. Yeah. Valvano, he wasn't at that level. They haven't had a coach in recent history that has defined their program. I don't disagree. The scandal is I think it's garbage. The scandals, I don't care.
The only thing I will say, right, is that the scandal is what ultimately led to them having to get rid of Valvano. And I do think that if Jimmy V had stayed longer, I'm not saying that he's on the same
they support
level.
They support all the cancer runs. That's why I call it BS.
That's only now.
Yeah, because it's either a gimmick or it's truth, right?
And I think it's as much gimmick as it is anything else for NC State.
I hate bad on NC State.
Trust me, I agree. I hate it. It pisses me off that they basically left him for dead, and then we're like, "Oh, you got cancer? Come back. We love you now."
That's what I'm saying. It's either a fact or it's a gimmick, and I would hate. I'm going to give them the benefit of the doubt on that one,
and that's
right?
fine. I mean, I'm saying as as the alumnus and like, you know,
I have 2 kids that graduated
I know,
from state.
but I'm just saying,
My daughter's going to state.
I'm not saying that you don't like state. I'm just saying, like, I'm the dude who roots for them every single time they play, no matter who they're playing.
Oh, okay, I'll give you that. But I will.
Dude, I love you. You know this, and I love that. This is why I love talking with you, is because these are the conversations that we have, and we can disagree about this, but it's all in fun. Like, because ultimately, what does it matter, right? Like,
it doesn't matter. Like, at the end of the day, I'm going to go to sleep. But I think state can get their act together. I think their problem is not. It was never the scandal. It was just the fact they've never gotten somebody to lead their program. That's it.
I mean, I just don't see why.
Why is the women's basketball team so competitive? Why is their baseball team so competitive? Why is their men's and women's soccer team so competitive? Right.
Every other sport, basically, except for men's basketball and football.
Right. It's not. But
I don't get it. That's what I can't figure out. I mean, I'm struggling too, man. And I know, like, look, I hear exactly what you're saying, right? You go back and look at football, right? We start with Chuck Amato.
Yeah, they're football.
Right?
Yeah.
Chuck Amato.
These people are ride or die for Amato.
Yeah, they still are.
There
are people who still love Chuck Amato. Not that they wanted him to still be coach, right? I think most people agreed, like, nah, it's kind of time to move on from that. But to be able to steal somebody from Florida State, right, who was also an NC State alum and who brought that level of swagger with him, like, that was what NC State needed in that moment. And what did Chuck Amato do? He helped to define the program by building the top football facility in the country at the time, right? The Wendell Murphy Center was the #1 football facility in the country at the time, and he was the one who made that happen. That was never going to happen without him coming in and saying, you guys want to beat Florida State? You got to spend money like Florida State. And State struggles with that. They struggle mightily. I mean, like Dave Doran, I like the guy, right? I don't know that he's the head coach that takes you to national championships. I don't see that. I see him as, I can win 8 games most years. I might win 10, right?
I might win the ACC
6,
tournament.
But
no, he might consistently win in the ACC, right?
Yeah.
That's all. That's the North Carolina problem.
Like, I'm okay with that, honestly.
See, but that's your problem. You're okay with
I'm okay with that for now because everything else has been garbage before this. Like, I want some level.
This is my problem with North.
This is
this is my problem.
The Carolina.
Yeah, but North Carolina fans have this I want to win in my region mentality, right? Which is
Do you think state fans don't want to win? We would sell our souls.
You settle like
but we have been told that nothing better than what we have now is what we should expect.
Chris, people in this state, they settle for like regional wins. Alabama, they think.
But you think Alabama doesn't care about losing to Auburn?
They don't because they know like their eyes are set on the national wins. I think that is a major malfunction of North Carolina, like the state fans of the schools in the state. They settle on the local rivalries way too much, and I think that's the type of coach you recruit. Hey, Chris, we'll hire you. We just want to beat Carolina 2 games. We want to beat Duke 2 games because that's on their schedule. That's on their schedule.
Tom O'Brien was going to get you a win against Carolina every year except for his last year, and that's what got him fired, right? To some degree.
But you see my point?
But also because Debbie Yao had come in and she didn't really like Tom O'Brien all that much. And,
yeah, but Debbie Yao is a great coach. Doesn't matter.
Trust me. Debbie Yao was probably the best thing that's happened to NC State sports since Jim Valvano got kicked out. Like, without a doubt.
So my point being, it still proves my point. Like it's a regional focus. It's not about a national program.
But I don't feel like that was the goal with Keats. The goal with hiring Keats wasn't go beat Carolina and Duke. It was like they were trying to look for. I mean, Debbie Yao in that case was looking for somebody who was going to come in and define the program with a style, right? And that was what she felt like she had in Keats because he had this 4-guard, big system, and it was all about getting up and down the court. We're going to play tough defense. We're going to play full court.
But
defense.
it doesn't translate to the Midwest teams, right? So when you look at Roy, right? Where did Roy come from?
The Midwest.
The Midwest. Right. The issue with Carolina was you would bite your nails when Carolina played what teams? a Midwest
But
team.
why would you worry about
Kansas,
playing a Midwest team if that's what he knows?
I'm saying like no, so with Dean, every time Carolina played, it was like we're good until we get to Kansas, we're good until we get to Kentucky, we're good until Indiana. That was the rivals weren't really in the ACC or on the East Coast, right? Carolina could compete up and down the East Coast, could not compete very consistently in the Midwest. Like UCLA, not a problem. Cal, not a problem. UNLV, not a problem. They could hold their own against those teams.
So did State.
It was all with Valvano, not with anybody else. Though that's my point.
But you
so
said Valvano wasn't the guy either.
No, I did not. I said Valvano was that's after Valvano. After Valvano, look at the recruitment of State, right? So every replacement after Valvano was more about how do we stand in the ACC? How do we stand in the Southeast?
Valvano's immediate replacement was about how do we right this ship? How do we make this look good? And so they got Les Robinson in there, which was a disaster. And then it was Herb Sendek, right?
Right.
Who was what? He was what coaching tree did he come from?
He was an assistant coach.
No, he wasn't at State.
He wasn't even but he was a head coach wherever he came from.
No, you're right. He was an assistant coach wherever he came from. You're absolutely right.
Yeah. So all I'm saying is like State, if they want to fix
the last 10 years as the bottom dweller of the ACC basketball program, let alone the country.
Yeah, they always went to NIT. They were like they were
lucky
killing
to get in the NIT at that point. With
my point being is if you look at succession plans from other programs, right? It's never really about the regional wins. If you look at the top performing football teams in college, it's not about regional wins. Yeah, you can have your local rivalries all day. It's not about that, though. It's about how do we perform in the national stage.
But how do you perform on the national stage which you can't beat the own people in your conference? Like, you have to win inside your own conference before you go outside of the conference. I mean, if you want to get to the NCAA tournament, you gotta win your conference.
Yeah, but those are the reps. The reps are basically like, okay, can I win in my neighborhood? That's like day one.
But
stuff,
that's not.
right?
I mean, like,
but you're preparing.
But that's what we weren't doing that. Like, so that's what I'm saying is that like they looked at it and said, all right, well, we got to figure out how we do that first before we start. Like, again, we are looking for singles here, not home runs.
Or the question could be, okay, we're trying to beat Carolina. Carolina struggles with Kentucky. So how do we beat Kentucky?
We tried to hire John Calipari. We had no. I am serious. We were this close to hiring John Calipari after Herb Sendek left. But because you want to talk about leadership, oh, buddy, can I go on about some inept leadership in the sports department? Lee Fowler was the worst thing to ever happen to NC State sports. That guy had no job being the sports, the athletic director. He literally lowballed both Rick Barnes, who would have come from Texas at the time, and Calipari, who had just won the national championship in Memphis. Now, granted, the national championship in Memphis got taken away from him, and I'm not saying that I wanted Calipari, right? Like,
yeah, because Texas is not a real program.
Well, and I didn't really want Rick Barnes either, but I'm just saying, like, who did we end up hiring? Sidney fucking Lowe.
But do you see? But at some level, you're kind of proving my point.
I don't see how.
You're literally, right? It's not about if I can beat my local competitor's biggest problems, I can win a national championship, and I think that's where State went wrong.
I mean, maybe
I
mean, you look at like the 10 years that we had Herb Sendek. The first 5 were garbage. The second 5, it was like, But
the games he was winning were games that he really needed to win. That's my point.
Sure, but part of the deal, and I'm not disagreeing with you here in terms of the mindset of State fans, right? State fans believe you got to beat Carolina and Duke, right? But
that's the wrong opponent.
The problem with Sendek was he wasn't winning the other games either at the end, right? Like, and I'm not a big Herb Sendek fan in general. I didn't love when Princeton doesn't run the Princeton offense anymore. Maybe you shouldn't run it either. I'm just saying, like,
but Princeton is not even like
right, exactly. It's not like you're stealing from UCLA or UNLV, like any of these teams that actually did anything. We're gonna just go way back,
Right.
and we're gonna have. I mean, God, it's so hard because there are players that I love from those years, like Cam Bennerman, Marcus Melvin. Like, there are guys who I just like, I loved, and they probably wouldn't have come. Julius Hodge. I mean, like Julius Hodge.
right.
That guy is still one of my favorite NC State guys of all time, right? And I hated that, like everything that happened with him afterwards where he got drafted by Denver and then he got shot like randomly in the leg, and that was basically
Right.
the end of his professional career, but it was just like that guy.
My point being, if you're gonna try to build or rebuild a program, so NC State, if you're listening and you want to hire me, I don't have to be a coach.
Just a consultant.
I probably can't do just a consultant. You're playing local. Like I would look at the teams that my top competitors struggle with, and I would be trying to build a program that can beat those people.
I guess.
Because if I'm
I don't know.
I mean, you're
Go ahead.
but it makes sense.
I had this thought the other day because I'm, with all of, there's the news that Texas and Oklahoma, right, are going to the SEC now. You heard about that, right?
Yeah, I you know what? You're about to do some editing. The SEC.
Yeah.
That is not a conference anymore. It's a money grab, kind of like Notre Dame. They're a money grab. It's kind of like they play both sides of the fence. Like I'm super pissed that. Well, I don't want to get into that. The conferences are weak.
Yeah.
Like I think every conference we have that's in the NCAA is weak. It has nothing to do with the athletes. Nope. Has nothing to do with the programs anymore at the schools. It's all about how can we keep slicing this pie up and make the most money.
It was Maryland going to the Big Ten for more money, right? 10, 12 years ago, and basically pissing on the rest of the ACC and saying, tradition, none of that stuff matters, we don't care, all we want is more money. What has Maryland done since then? Gotten their freaking asses handed to them regularly.
They've been tanked ever since here.
Texas A&M leaving the Big 12 or whatever and going to...
I thought it was a Pac-12.
Oh, I thought they were part of the Big 12 with Texas.
You might be right.
But
yeah.
What was previously the Southwestern Conference, right? Basically, they left to go to the SEC. Now they're like, no, we can't let Texas in because then there'll be a second school from Texas, and Texas is the only unique thing about us. So I think Texas A&M's argument. But yeah, it's I don't know. It's what it made me think is, do I want to be, would I rather, as NC State, right? Would I rather be the doormat for a conference like the SEC, or would I rather be the champion of a smaller conference where, not that I know I can win, right? Not like I'm going to go play in the, Conference USA sort of thing, but where I feel like the schools around me are on an equal competitive level, right? Where I don't know. I mean, like, me personally, I'd almost rather just say, fuck it, let's go win. Like, let's go win somewhere.
I would rather say make the conferences regional. Like, yeah, but geographically
that's
regional.
Over now. That's not.
But it shouldn't be. It should go back to that.
There's no way. What I kind of see happening, right, is that the SEC is basically going to become a super league in the football sense, right? Like the Premier League in soccer.
No.
Not in like the relegation manner, right? But
first of all, the Premier League sucks.
Okay. Well, and I think the SEC is going to suck when they're done with this. But it's basically like we're going to pull in anybody that we feel right helps bring money to this pot, right? It's not necessarily about being the best football teams, right? But who's got the most to bring financially. And then they'll get to 20, 24 teams, maybe 32, right? Which is stupid for one conference. And then they're just going to kind of go off and do their own thing. And because the NCAA is essentially at this point, after name, image, and likeness, has said, we don't even know what to do anymore. You guys figure it out.
Well, I think the NCAA is a BS organization in the first place.
It's a fucking fraud is what it is. The idea that you have your own member institutions policing themselves.
is stupid.
Like, why do we need prison guards? Just put prisoners in charge. Let them police themselves, right? Why do we need policemen? Just let the citizens police themselves. That's basically the NCAA's motto here. We trust you to break the rules and then get in trouble.
Yeah, but it's all a.
I'm sorry. You could probably tell that I am a little bit invested in this topic. Like,
I am, but I'm not at the same time. It's kind of like, it's like at the end of the day, I think with when it comes to football, they're going to eat themselves alive.
Yeah.
Like that's the path they want to go down, and have at it. I'm not going to chase you down to say stay off the ledge. Yeah. With other sports, I don't think it's going to happen.
Well, I mean,
football is a big money grab.
It is, right? And they're hoping that big money grab ultimately pays off for all of the other expenses that they're going to have to incur. It won't, right? And that's the whole thing. Like, people have been arguing even with the ACC when they brought in Syracuse and Boston College. I know. For Virginia Tech, Miami, and then Notre Dame to some degree, right? Like, even Notre Dame sitting here being like, well, now we got to send our swim teams to South Bend, Indiana, right? Which is nowhere near any other school that's in the conference. I mean, you can't even really call it the Atlantic Coast Conference anymore.
Notre Dame should go back to wherever they came from. Yeah. And they only did it for the basketball play because they couldn't get recruits. Right. That's my honest opinion.
The fact that the ACC and freaking what's his name? God, I hate him. He's a former UNC athletic director, Jim Swafford.
That's the only reason.
No, he's not the only reason I hate him. It's also because I think he's one of the worst leaders in college sports. I think he made some of the worst decisions here recently. Look, there is a little bit. Yes, there's part of me that doesn't like him because I think that he has been. I think he 90%. Plays favorites with his own home program. I don't understand how again, right? Like, I wouldn't want Debbie Yao appointed. Well, okay, I would. But I would understand why other schools would be like, yeah, you can't have a former AD from your school that's now in charge of all of the schools. That seems like a little bit of...
Why?
Because all of this college athletic shit is just so incestuous.
See, but I think state can fix their problem because they only have one program that struggles. Like, consistently struggles. The football program, I'll tell you this.
Football, I mean, I'm with you. Like, I am fine to basically leave football alone right now. Like,
I think state's problem with basketball, it's not the players. It's not. They just gotta get the right head coach.
I like Kevin Keats a lot. Right, like, I like him as from what I have seen of him in press conferences and stuff. Like, I like the way that he carries himself. I think that he is a good basketball mind. I don't know that he has the experience yet to necessarily understand all of the things that he needs to do in that role. But I'm also at the point now where it's like, man, if we get rid of Kevin Keats, who is going to come here? Who are you going to hire to replace him?
But why are you making it zero sum? It's stupid.
Because ultimately, because you have to fill that void. You can't just fire somebody and have nobody running the basketball program.
But so what I propose is basically a course correction, right? If state stops focusing on how do we recruit to beat Carolina or Duke, they're fine.
So you think state's solution should basically be to go hire a Midwest coach? But the problem is you can't recruit the Midwest players that you do necessarily.
Yeah, you can. Yes, you can. You sure shit can. Because at the end of the day, those athletes, they understand there is a less than 1% chance they're going to the NBA, and they want to get a good education.
I disagree wholeheartedly with that statement.
Right. Yeah, I'm being a little bit naive, right?
I think
But you get the exposure.
I hear exactly what you're saying. Like, there's an element of that, yes, that I think does play into it. But I think what you see now with the transfers, right, with kids,
the transfers,
where kids go somewhere and it's like, I didn't get enough playing time this year, so I'm going to transfer out, right? I'm not willing to sit 2 years on the bench to play my 2 years or my 3 years, down the road. That has basically gone out the door, and now it's all just like me. I want to be starting when I get there. How do you help me get to the league? Everybody, I'm good enough to play in the NBA, and it's your fault if I don't get there, basically.
But the variable that people keep forgetting about is that now we're recruiting from high school. Stop that. Across all sports, stop doing that. It should be like freaking
start in middle school, elementary school, really. Like, you know what? Just go to the hospitals.
But you see my point? Like, the NBA is not helping the argument. The AAU is not helping.
No, I mean, yeah.
Like, there's a lot of things where, like, if you eliminate those distractions, those students, those athletes understand that, hey, even if you go to the pros, you might be benched, you might get hurt. What do you fall back on? There's a lot of context to the problem that we still haven't fixed.
No,
yet.
And you're absolutely right.
And that's
you and I are probably sitting here treating symptoms more than root causes in some degree in this conversation. And I mean, image, and likeness, right? It was one of those things where it came out and everybody was like, "Oh, the NCAA finally did something right," and it's like, are you kidding me?
No, they didn't.
Didn't do anything. They had to have a court tell them that they couldn't restrict this anymore. That's what they did. And they said, okay, we'll comply with the court order now that you're forcing us to do this. But please beware, we still don't like this very much. Like,
right. There's a lot of things where you're kind of like, and even that is up in the air because is it if they're playing, if they're not playing, what is the what are the bounds?
You had the deal at Miami, right, where they basically said because the schools still can't pay the players, right? But what they did was they had the football team basically agree to some, name, image, likeness deal, but the school takes all of that money and puts it into a pot that they can then choose to distribute on a regular basis to athletes of different sports. Their payroll, literally, like that's how they're funding, and that's what this is turning into, right? Is it's going to be more or less, in that sense, a pay for play, which I don't care. Pay these guys. Pay them. I don't care. It's not going to ruin the game. If they're making money off of this, I don't see how that's possible.
So, but then you extend a potential, like, non-quarterback, basically quarterback, 7-year career for a quarterback typically, right? So you take a 3 to 4 year career and you've extended it to 8 because of college.
Okay, right.
You made it completely more complicated than what it has to be.
But in that case, you're saying the NFL should be drafting directly from high school?
No, I'm saying like, so if I can get paid in college, and I think the students should get paid for that, right? Because the schools are making millions of dollars, right? I can get hurt my sophomore year, and I'm done. Sure. What's my guarantee for an education?
Right. Well, okay, so. Personally, what I would love to see, right, is that fixed. And I think it's one of the things that I do really appreciate about NC State that I think they do a pretty good job of generally is with their athletes. If a student athlete is injured to the point where they can't play anymore, they have consistently extended their scholarship offer to them regardless, right, and allowed them to finish their education even though they're not playing anymore and they're not able to play. But I know that doesn't happen at all schools, right? There is no guarantee at that point.
I think it happens at Carolina.
I think Carolina is another one who does a really good job with that. And that's just to be clear.
But you see my point there, right? Like, so I'm saying like
there's a lot of other stuff that needs to get fixed too, right?
Yeah, the context of that problem is more so than which conference, which pay for play or whatever it is. It's like, look, first of all, they're not commodities. Like they're kids that are really, really good. They're better than like 80% of the other people around them. They got a scholarship. They may not be as good as the 1% that get drafted. They're not going to, even if they get drafted, they may not be better than the the top 90% of people that get playtime, like what do they fall back on? So the whole system itself is like broken at different stages. So my argument is basically like, yeah, like what I would fix as far as like if you're a fan in a major sports state, right? And we have quite a handful of them. We have regions that are like they're machines, but we're chewing people up and spitting them out. I couldn't tell you the second string power forward for Carolina 5 years ago. Couldn't tell you his name. You couldn't either. You can do it for state.
Malik Abdul-Abu.
That is impressive.
I don't know.
What is he doing? You just like, oh, that might be racist.
No,
Like,
it's
you
not.
just, like,
No,
made up
like
a-
I'm thinking of a specific player. I'm thinking back about 5 years, and I'm thinking he was probably because I think he was a freshman at the time. So he was probably, but then he became the starter later on, which is part of the reason that I know him. And
okay, right? But so like go one step beyond him, right? That's the problem. It's like sport is good when there's a benefit. Yeah. If there's no benefit to both parties, it's not good. Yeah. It becomes a machine.
I agree. So, I agree wholeheartedly with that, right? And that is a big part of it that needs to be fixed, right? I mean, that's where these schools raking in millions and millions and spending it so that they can basically say, "Oh, we don't have any money to pay the players," is a total crock. I mean, it's
right.
Like I've walked through NC State's practice facility at NC.
I get emails now. My daughter hasn't even
and they're already asking you for money.
They're asking me for money. I'm like, God.
It's one of my favorite bits from John Mulaney, one of his stand-ups where he's talking about like he got a letter from his college that was like, we haven't seen you in a while, give us some money. It's like I already gave you $120,000 and you spent it already. Like, what kind of crackhead organization are you running over here? And you ask me for more money?
That's hilarious. But it's like my daughter hasn't even like stepped foot on the campus
you're not even
to
to
like
that
live there.
Yet.
And I'm like, yo, like you guys are you're taking all my pennies right now, or a lot of them, and it's like, what? So those are things I think about. It's like, look, and I'll be honest, like as a person that loves to watch any given sport, right? I'm torn between my one of my drugs of choice, competition, and being a parent, or being an actual adult, or being a person that understands business. You can only the Aesop's fable of the golden goose, right? If you don't feed the goose, it eventually dies, and you spin all the eggs. Like you have all the golden eggs, and you bought like everything new, and the goose dies. What do you do next? And it's kind of a level of sustainability, yeah, right. So I think American sport is. It's especially in the college and high school realm.
We're killing the golden goose, right? We have been for a long time now.
Yeah, and it's just like, what do you like?
But even at the professional levels, right? I mean, like they put those guys all the CTE stuff in the NFL. And they're like, fuck it, just send them out there, let them go get hit some more. What do we care? We're gonna replace him in 2 years anyways, right? I don't care if he goes home and kills his whole family. I mean, that's the kind of shit that we're ending up with now because you had a heartless organization who basically said, these guys are interchangeable. It doesn't matter. And that's exactly how college is looking at it too, right? I mean, like, especially the big programs. You telling me Alabama gives a crap about whoever their quarterback is? No. They got 15 more guys lined up waiting to take that job. Like, it doesn't matter.
I'll be 45 this year, and, like, my shoulder injury doesn't seem to be getting better, right? Like, and I was thinking about it today as I was working, and I was trying to move my arm. I'm like, I can't imagine if I played football throughout, like, just 5 years longer, I'd be dead. I would be like in the fetal position, crying in my office, like, oh my God, what's wrong with me? like we're putting our kids through this without any type of compensation, without any type of regard for their future, without any type of anything.
Yeah. And go ahead.
It just blows my mind. I don't have words.
I get really frustrated when you see the parents that are pushing the kids to do it too, right? Where it's like, this is your chance. This is our opportunity as a family, you know, to do something good and to make some money. And so you need.
Well, to those parents.
Yeah, I mean, a big double you from the Chris and Andre show. If you're listening, please continue to listen because we'll continue to insult you. But fuck you.
My kids are successful in their own right, and as a parent, I want them to be happy for themselves and to find joy in life for themselves, not for me. Yeah. You know, like I've had my opportunities, and I will continue to have opportunities to do things well for myself. Yeah. But I don't expect my kids to provide for me later on. Now, I actually watched Patriot Act with
yeah,
dude. When you're talking about retirement and how that's like a myth, and I'm not gonna knock on my Asian and Hispanic brothers and sisters, like, and I get it, or my pretty much immigrants, right? Where he's like, I asked my dad about my retirement plan. He goes, Hassan, you're my retirement plan. I'm like, I could never. Now I laughed. I don't see myself ever expecting it of my children.
No, it's a weird thing, honestly, and I feel like, correct me if I'm wrong, it seems like it happens a lot in the baby boomer generation too, right? That time period.
Yeah.
You know, not necessarily just here in the United States, but I mean, like, there is an element of that in my parents, I think. Like, not so much like you better be in position to support us, but like, hey, like, there might become a time where, you know, we might need a little bit of help. And granted, like, my parents have always been very forthcoming with help on my end as well. And so it's right. I've always looked at it very much as like a two-way street. But, you know, I think back to like when I was younger, you know, there were times where my dad was like really excited about me getting into golf because he looked at it as like, man, you get to play a game for a living, right? Like, these guys get to go out there and play golf for a living. Like, wouldn't that be great? And if you can get good enough, like, you can make decent money playing golf. And I like golf, right? Like, I like to go play golf every once in a while, but I don't like golf that much.
I don't. Yeah, that's
But it wasn't about, like, you need to make money so I can retire. It was always about, from his perspective, I felt like it was always about, this will make life easier for you. This will make life better. This will allow you to enjoy life more to its fullest than if you're stuck working some desk job. And I don't know. Like, for me, I don't look at it that way, I guess.
Yeah, I'll be the first one to tell you that I'm not married to money. And that's because money caused me to lose stuff, right? And I've reconciled that emotion. I'm like, yeah, I like to keep the lights on. Don't get me wrong. But I'm never going to do something because it pays me a lot of money. About 3 or 4 months ago, I got a job offer to move to Tampa. I didn't tell my wife.
That was smart.
Because I don't want to live in
like, that's way too close to the beach. She'd be a little tempted.
Tampa. Who wants to live in Tampa?
Christy lived in Tampa for a while.
Yeah, I don't want to do that. That's crazy. It's Florida.
It doesn't matter. It's Florida. That's what it really boils down to. It's not Tampa. I wouldn't want to live anywhere in Florida.
But I also don't want to, like, not be home. Like, I enjoy being home. Like, I enjoy, like, being with my family. I enjoy coming home to my wife, or, you know, being with my wife. Those are things that, now granted, I would have made a lot more money, but I'm not married to money.
And at what cost, right? Like, that's what it boils down to, is, in my mind, is it's like there's a trade-off there most often. Yeah. And if you're willing to make that exchange, I mean, that's your choice, right? Like, I'm not sitting here saying you're doing the wrong thing. But I'm with you in that ultimately, like, I've had opportunities to go somewhere else and make more money, you know? And more often than not, I've made the decision, you know what? I really like what I'm doing. Like, I feel good about it. I understand my contribution, you know, like how I'm kind of a part of this organization or whatever.
Right.
I feel like I'm given opportunities to learn and expand my knowledge, and you know, ultimately that I'm a valued part of this. And those are so much more important to me than any paycheck that I get at the end. You know, and that plus the time to spend with my family and doing the things that I want to do. And that's, I should say, that comes first, right? More than anything. And that's why I took the job that I have now, because it's one of the reasons. As much as I liked what I did at E Area, and as much as I loved the team that I had at E Area, I stopped feeling that, you know? I stopped feeling like I understood where I fit in that organization, that I saw what my opportunities were and kind of where things were going forward. And then I recognized that over those years, I had sacrificed a good amount of time with family to try and build my reputation up there, right? And I didn't want to do that anymore. I didn't want an organization that was going to require me to abandon the people that I love and care about most in order to prove my loyalty to them. Like, that's bullshit at the end of the day.
Yeah,
Like,
I don't.
I don't get how people do that. I don't get how organizations have that level of expectation. Like,
I get why people do that. I really do. Right? It's this there's a certain level of life that we all want to that most people want to attain, and that's normal. Yeah. But the question they don't ask is, what does this cost me? Right? And if you never ask that question, you can't even estimate what that's going to cost you. Then it's a rational decision, right? And then when you look back in the rearview mirror, you're like, I missed a lot, you know. My daughter is the only one of my children I was able to take to her first day of school, right? That was important to me because my parents didn't do that, and I thought that was important, and blah blah blah. So it's not to be dismissed that people desire that, right? They want the material things are not bad. Yeah. The question that you always have to ask yourself is, what is this going to cost me? So the advice I give my sons and my daughter, like, hey, do all that stuff while you're single. Yeah. Right? Go travel. Go ball out. Go buy whatever you want to buy. Like, and just get all that out of your system. Because when it's not just about you being responsible for yourself, but you contributing to like a household, a family, it's harder to make those decisions.
I mean, you're impacting potentially the well-being of your children and their future.
Yeah.
With these decisions once they're in the picture, right? And it's funny because I was going to say the same thing. My cousin, who I think is turning 30 this year, feeling old, he spent the last 2 years, I think, living in Singapore, working for a couple of different companies over there. And he made the decision here most recently that he's going to move back to the States because, in part, Singapore's lockdown stuff has just made it less desirable to be there. But also because I think he recognized, like, that's not where I'm looking to set up shop long term. And I'm not really finding what it is that I'm looking for over there. The company that I was working for, I didn't have it wasn't what I thought it was going to be going in, or, whatever it may be. But I was excited because I'm like, well, good. Now I get to like actually see you more often, And I was also bummed because I'm like, now I don't have a place to go when I go to Singapore. But but yeah, I mean, like, I think, and then I look at like my sister and her husband, right? They were living separately for a long time when they were in California while they were dating, and had spent a lot of their money on travel at the time, right? And then when they both temporarily retired, essentially, at like age 32 or 34 or something ridiculous like that.
Life is hard.
They took all of their savings that they had banked and went and traveled the world, and now they're living in Portugal. You know, like they traveled and wanted to see, because that was their whole thing, was like, we want to travel and see all these different parts of the world we haven't been to yet before we settle down and start to have a family. And once they had done that, they found Portugal and were like, this is where we want to be for the at least the short future. Like, this is where we kind of want to set up shop. And so they just got approved, I think, for their 2-year residency there, which was great for them. But, you know, like I look at that and say, like, yeah, like, if that's what you want to do it that way. And I recognize not everybody gets that opportunity, right? I think that's part of it, is that based on the way that you grow up and the opportunities that you have, or the decisions that you make, you may not find yourself in a position to do the things that you want to do when you're 25 to 30, right? Or there's those people who are like, well, I want to have kids young so I can enjoy my 40s and 50s. And it's like, okay, but you're not going to enjoy your 30s at all.
Yeah, but you can. You can. Hit me up and I'll let you know.
That's what I was going to say, is like, not that I'm like, hey, everybody, be like Chris. But I feel like I have found, at least from personally, right, like some semblance of balance there, where it's like, I've got a kid, like I have my family, like, but at the same time, I've got a job that allows me to travel some, and a job that gives me the flexibility to be with my family when I'm home. Like, that was the big thing about this. When I looked at it, was like, at the end of the day, even though I'm going to be traveling and spending overnights away at times, it's going to give me so much more freedom and flexibility to be with my family and be with my daughter when I am home. That's the trade-off, right? Like, yeah, I have to do this, but the cost, or not the cost, it's like, this is what I get, and the cost is that I have to be away sometimes. But
I don't disagree, and I think that's just a level of it's not maturity, it's looking, finishing the thought, right? Like, a lot of people say, oh, that shiny car looks great. Yeah, it does. Insurance, maintenance, new tires, like,
Hey, right now those used cars are looking great, right?
Yeah, it's like,
so
not so
just
much.
to kind of, we can kind of wrap up, because I know we're getting long here, but collaboration, synergy, thinking outside the box, raising the bar, breaking down silos, shifting the paradigm, disrupting the market, business. I've had my Toyota Tacoma now for almost 3 years. The lease is up on it in November, right? I called the dealership just to see, like, hey, so I've got a couple of months left. I'm a little over on the mileage, but what are my options? And the guy's like, well, right now I can get you into a brand new 4Runner for a lot less than I can get you into anything used. And I'm like, okay. And he's like, and truth be told, you probably have some equity in that car at this point over what they estimated because of where the used car market is. He's like, so it may be best for me to just sit there and buy the car because of the equity in it, and then turn around and sell it to somebody else.
Yeah.
It's stupid. I mean, the freaking financial stuff that's going on right now. I know we were talking about the housing market and everything earlier, but that's just like this used car market. You've got out in Kansas, they have racetracks full of F-150s that don't have computer chips in them because they can't get them.
Apparently Toyota bought them all.
Oh, did they? Oh,
Yep.
Bought all the computer chips.
Yep.
I thought you meant the F-150s. Just buy some Tundras, guy.
So Toyota bought all the processors.
So Toyota saw the long game, right? Toyota saw it coming, and they jumped on it before everybody else did, and they put everybody else in the frickin'. But even these guys, Fred Anderson Toyota in Raleigh, they had, like, he was calling because he was like, oh, I got this one 4Runner, and then he called me today, and he was like, actually, that one just sold. He's like, but I'll get a couple more next month.
Yeah, I think that conservatively, we're looking at 2023. We're going to see the bubble. I think probably by the fall of next year, the housing bubble will burst because they won't be able to stimulate interest rates that long. Then secondly, it's going to be cars.
I will say the one important distinction between what I believe will be the housing burst here and what we experienced in 2008.
Oh, it'd be a lot
because
different.
the lending practices are different, right? That was a huge chunk of the issues previously. It was like, oh, or do you have a pulse? Here's a $500,000 loan on a $200,000 house. Like,
that's the only variable that will be somewhat normal. But I think that a lot of things are overvalued.
You're not wrong. I mean, and I do think,
if you buy now in a hot market, God bless you. I hope that's your house. Right? If you're buying like your first house, I'd wait. Like, it's just not.
No, you need to.
The
if
math,
you can, right? Try and give it another year. I mean, at least.
Yeah. My gut's telling me that we're going to see the housing bubble burst. Secondly, it's going to be the cars, and I think a lot of that's also driven by inventory.
Right, which is all supply chain again, right? Like,
right. So there's a lot of complications, and I'm not a doom and gloom type of guy, but it's like, but that doesn't make sense. I looked at a house that was like 5 and some change 4 months ago, 4 or 5 months ago. It's like 7.25 now.
No, what do they say that on average housing prices rose 24% over the last 12 months?
Yeah,
it's insane. And that's like across the nation. That's not like North Carolina.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, granted, I think I added roughly $100,000 in equity over a 3-year period in my house in the carry market, based on what it appraised for previously.
Yeah, I just think that, and then on top of that, you look at the unemployment numbers, right? So it's like. It literally is an economy of the blind leading the blind. And I get the Fed's job. I'm not an economist, but I do think that artificial rates aren't a really good long-term strategy, right?
You can't, like you said, you can't keep it there forever, right? You can't just maintain this ridiculously low interest rate in the hopes of stimulating the economy via that. Like, there have to be other mechanisms in place to help fix the problems that we're experiencing. It's treating the symptoms, not the root cause, once again.
And then you throw in inflation.
Yeah, well,
like, that's like consumer goods are like up 22% right now. So it's like something's got to give, right?
Great movie.
There's a lot of things where it's like, I don't know how this plays out, but my gut's telling me it's going to be like a knee-jerk reaction from the Fed down is going to be bad, right? You've got supply chain issues. You've got an artificial interest rate. You've got low supply, high demand, and that's a lot of because you've pushed more money into the economy. Then you're talking about a $15 an hour minimum wage, and I'm guessing Amazon's about to get in trouble too because it keeps showing that commercial. So there's a lot of things where it's like this doesn't like it may not be 08, 09 where I lost a epic ton of money, but it's going to be damn close.
Well, I mean, go to any restaurant basically these days, right? You'll have some of the worst service you've probably ever had, and it's not your waiter's fault. It's they have no staff. I mean, we went to dinner last night at Nikki's Gourmet Sushi in downtown Wilmington, and they had 2 wait staff members working the entire restaurant. And I mean, like when we went in, I didn't go in like, "Where's my," I wasn't Andre Powell customer. I was. Where's my napkins?
Speaking of which, somebody told me a couple weeks ago, like a restaurant's a great thing. I'm like, a restaurant's a terrible thing. Like, I would not want to own a restaurant right now.
No,
I
can
just
you imagine?
I would. No. Yes.
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 Sorry. Yes, of course you can.
Like,
but it was like we went to dinner the other night, and we were joking around with the waitress, and my mom said something to the effect of like, "Well, we can't promise we'll be on our best behavior tonight." And she was like, "Guys, I make $2.13 an hour." Like. Yeah.
Wow.
That's fucking pitiful.
And she's trying to keep the lights
exactly.
on. And it's just like I
I've never understood that the whole wait staff, like it's okay to pay them less because they're gonna get tips. Like tips aren't a guarantee. I mean, like maybe to some degree, but it's still.
To be fair, my daughter literally she works in a coffee shop. She made $80 in one day in tips.
Yeah. I mean, I used to make good money
$80.
even at Starbucks in tip money. Like, it wasn't bad. Like,
but that's a niche type of like food
it is,
service,
very much
right?
so.
You have a higher end clientele. They're gonna spend like $6 on a coffee. So what's $3 here and there, right? But in general, no. I think, and I don't want to be pessimistic about it. My gut's telling me like 20.
But I don't think that's being pessimistic, right? I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but 18 months ago, right? 15 months ago, when you and I were sitting here recording podcasts talking about where the economy was and where it was going to end up, 2023, 2024 was basically what we were saying we saw as the end of what we're dealing with right now, right? Like that's how long it's going to take for everything to basically reestablish and stabilize from the upheaval that it has experienced over the last several months.
The curveball was I didn't think that, or did I believe that our supply chain was so bad? It's way
bad. I mean,
bad.
It's really bad. It's really, really bad.
So we import. That means we import like 70% of durable goods. We import 62% of the things that drive durable goods, like cars. Like so, if we're
when we import like 40% raw materials, it's insane. How do you operate on that? I mean, but this is what we've done with our economy over the years, right? Is like we eliminated manufacturing jobs and we said, IT, technical, white collar jobs. That's where information technology is what,
And that's why since 2008, 2009, we've been in a deficit of 1 million houses a year. Because I was listening to NPR. They said there's nobody doing trades. Because the message was you can make more money in white collar jobs than you can in trades.
Which is no longer true in a lot of cases, right? It's
exactly.
almost the reverse. Like, go to trade school. Get an actual trade that you can go put to work. And we were talking about this, or we've talked about it before, talking about restaurants. Made me think of it. I was driving down, I think, 17th Street in Wilmington. And I saw just randomly, like, this exhaust shop, like an automotive exhaust shop. It's a little, individual entrepreneur. But I had the thought, I was like, it's not like there aren't other exhaust shops around here, right? But this guy said, this is my skill, this is my trade, and I'm going to open up a business that does this. And at the end of the day, what he probably tries to do is differentiate himself with customer service or whatever it is, right? Like he finds his niche of customers that are going to come in and work with him. And that's what people should be doing. Not like, I want to go make $1 bazillion opening up this restaurant that's just like the 50 other restaurants that are downtown, right? Like that's not, but find your niche, like find a skill, right, that is valuable and put that to work for you. That's what I just don't know.
I'll end it with this. Like, I think that I said before that the new economy is going to be about service driven, like your business. If it's service driven, you'll be fine, right? The gaps that we have that have been exposed, and I've got one. I'll talk to you about it offline. But that's where the economy has to shift to, right? So if we're not going to have manufacturing, then we have to, look at distributor, manufacturer, what's in the middle. And it's not about being the middleman. It's about, there are gaps there, right? Are you sourcing? There's a lot of different, avenues that you can get into that play.
Transportation. Right? I mean,
transportation, right? Logistics, right?
So
there's a lot of things.
Time to be a truck driver in this country.
Yeah. Well, you have 5 to 7 years before that goes by.
I mean, I have a buddy of mine who had, been working for different companies doing, like dump truck driving and stuff like that. He had his Class C license, and he finally saved up enough money and bought a couple of trucks. And so now he runs his own. And he struggles at times, because he's competing with these larger corporations that are able to bid much lower on some of these these jobs
Right.
and stuff, but he's found his niche. He's figured out how to make his company work for him and do that on his own, right? And he didn't jump into it from the get-go. He went and learned and gained the skills that he needed and understood basically what he was going to have to do in order to set that up. And that's what we need. We need more people who are doing this the right way and less people that are just trying to get in for the quick buck and get out.
Yeah. Well, ladies and gentlemen, we're super glad you joined us. We could talk for like probably another hour. You can always find us on Instagram.
I mean, we are on Instagram.
no,
I haven't posted
we are,
anything in
yeah.
years, but
God bless you if you find us on Instagram. But you can listen to our podcast on Google Podcasts, Apple Music, or Apple Podcasts. I am botching
you're
this.
doing great.
SoundCloud, Pandora, Intune, and I think that's about it. And pretty much wherever you want to find us. We have an RSS feed on our website at chrisandandreshow.com. You can pull our actual feed, put it into your favorite player. I use Plex. They're not paying us, but gosh, I love Plex. Send us an email at Chris and Andre Show.
Comments
at chrisandandreshow.com. I'm Andre at chrisandandreshow.com.
I'm Chris at chrisandandreshow.com.
We will be getting art. We will get
episodes
articles.
out. I mean, it will happen at some point. I'm gonna try and get at least one episode out this week before I have to go to Denver, so that I can feel a little bit better about that. But it probably won't be much more than that, unfortunately.
Yeah. So hopefully we get our act together. We really do appreciate it. And actually, I'll tell you what. I looked at the stats on SoundCloud before we started recording today, and I really, really, really appreciate. We both appreciate people that are sharing our content.
All you Tesla fanboys out there that love our YouTube video talking smack about you, thank you. Basically the only thing keeping us alive on YouTube right now in this doldrum. But we'll continue to talk more smack about Tesla and Elon Musk and anything else that you guys want to listen to, honestly.
Actually, Elon Musk said something that I actually agreed with. I don't dislike the guy. It's just like, just carry it through, dude. That's a whole nother topic. I will say this: you may or may not find us in the future on social media. I think I'm done. Like I think I'm emotionally done with that.
And I am quickly approaching the edge of done.
Yeah, I think I just don't have the because I'm already emotionally lazy, so I don't have the patience for the silly. Yeah.
I love you.
Some things don't work out in like face to face.
Are you saying that I wouldn't feel comfortable saying that to your face? You know that's not true. I would say that to you.
As you're running away, like you're old as But as always, I'm Andre.
I'm still Chris, at least until this guy kills me.
Hey, we're super glad you joined us. We'll talk to you next time.
Peace.
Deuces.